The Z28 badge on a Camaro is one of the most iconic nameplates in the American car world. That badge has adorned so many different body styles over the years, but not all of them shared the same performance pedigree. The second generation Camaro Z28s are some of the most popular, being built from 1970 to 1981. But the Z28 Camaro was a very different car in 1981 compared to its 1970 counterpart. In 1970, the Z28 made a very respectable 360 horsepower and 380 foot-pounds of torque from its 350 cubic inch small block V8. By 1981, though, power from the same size 350 small block was down to just 175 horsepower. And even worse, quarter-mile times were now in the 16-second range. It looked like the days of high-performance American V8s were gone, thanks to increased smog regulations and intermittent fuel shortages. But there was one faint glimmer of hope on the horizon for American performance after all, and that was a series of very special dealer-built, turbocharged Z28 Camaros that brought American V8 performance back in the time when it was needed most. And the dealer that built these Camaros was none other than the famous Yenko Chevrolet. This is the story of the 1981 Yenko Camaro Turbo Z. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Rare Cars. This is the channel where we dive into the past and explore some of the rarest and most iconic vehicles of all time. If you want to see more short-form documentaries on unique cars like the Yenko Turbo Z, or even the Yenko Stinger Corvair, then make sure that you are subscribed to the Rare Cars YouTube channel, as right now only about 2% of our viewers are actually subscribed, and every subscriber helps build our community. But now, let's get into the history of the turbocharged Camaro that you probably have never even heard about, the Yenko Turbo Z. Don Yenko and his Pennsylvania dealership were no strangers to building some of the baddest GM cars around. The Yenko Corvairs, Novas, Camaros, and Vegas have become the stuff of legends in the automotive community. In 1981, Yenko and his team knew that even though the automakers had choked all the fun out of their cars, that didn't mean that the buyers weren't still looking for something fast. Only this time around, there was no high-performance big block or special order options that Yenko could tick a box for on an order form and get. The hottest motor that they could put in the Z28 was the 175 horsepower 350. So they had to get creative. And that need for creativity led them down the rabbit hole of turbocharging, which was becoming an increasingly popular phenomenon. GM experimented with turbocharging their Corvairs back in the 60s, and in the early 80s, they had introduced the 3.8-liter turbocharged Buick V6 and the turbocharged 301 Pontiac V8 in the Turbo Trans Am. Around this time, Nissan had also begun implementing a turbocharger on its new 280ZXs as well. The writing was on the wall. Turbochargers were here to stay, and Yenko was set on using a turbocharger to boost the power of these anemic Z28s. Yenko worked out a deal with the turbo manufacturer Turbo International to utilize their turbochargers on his new Turbo Z28s. This installation was done by using what is called a blow-through setup, which means that the turbocharger forced air directly into the carburetor. This is a much more primitive setup than the turbocharged Buick Grand National had with its fuel injection system, but it got the job done nonetheless. The Yenko Turbo Zs would run 7 pounds of boost through their turbocharger, and they would not use a wastegate. The Z28 had a factory low compression ratio of just 8.2 to 1, which actually made it a decent candidate to turbocharge. Now, what's interesting is that Yenko himself never actually published an official horsepower figure for the turbocharged Camaros. Estimates slot the total horsepower of these Yenko Turbo Zs somewhere between 250 and 300 horsepower. The closest reference point to the Yenko Turbo Z would be the comparable 301 Pontiac Turbo Trans Am, which made 210 horsepower from its turbo 4.9-liter V8. Now, these Trans Ams clocked the quarter mile in high 16 to low 17 second range. When compared to the Yenko Turbo Z's 14.5 second quarter mile time, it is clear that the Yenko car had to have made way more power than the Trans Am. All Z28 Camaros that were equipped with the 350 cubic inch motor were paired to a 3-speed TH350 automatic transmission. The Yenko Turbo Zs also all packed a 10-bolt rear end with a long set of 308 gears. More so on the performance side, there were actually 2 stages of Yenko Turbo Z cars offered to customers, a Stage 1 and a Stage 2 car. The Stage 1 car was the generic Turbo Z that featured the upgraded engine with interior and exterior modifications. The Stage 2 cars were built more as a sports car than a straight line car. All of the Stage 2 Turbo Zs got Coney springs, new wider wheels and tires for improved lateral grip, and more chassis stiffening mods to make the cars more rigid in the turns. On the exterior, you could tell a Yenko Turbo Z apart because of its revised and lengthened front fascia. Plus, its very 80s style turbo writing is pretty much all over the car, so everybody in a 6-mile radius knew that your car was turbocharged just by looking at it. The interiors of the Stage 1 cars featured minor modifications, mainly to the instrument cluster and the dash to house the new boost gauge and other additions. The Stage 2 cars got all of the Stage 1 interior options, plus upgraded leather and a nicer, more sporty steering wheel. These Yenko Turbo Zs were some of the coolest and fastest cars that you could buy new in the early 80s. So how come you and I have never seen one out in the wild in real life? Well, that is because there were just 19 of them ever made. 16 Stage 1 Turbo Zs and just 3 Stage 2 Turbo Zs. Now, Yenko did initially set out to build a lot more than 19 of these Turbo Camaros. But the main problem that prohibited sales of these cars ended up being the price. A Stage 1 Turbo Z would ding the buyer's bank account for a full $11,000. And Stage 2 cars would cost a staggering $17,500 in 1981 money. For reference, a base model Z28 cost $8,000. So at the Stage 2 level, you would be paying more for modifications to the car than you would be paying for the underlying car. These Yenko Turbo Zs would also actually end up being the final Camaros ever built by Yenko himself, as Yenko Chevrolet closed its doors just a year later in 1982. Today, these Turbo Zs are some of the rarest of all the Yenko-built Camaros. In fact, the whereabouts of some of them are actually still unknown. When I was doing research on this car and I browsed through Google and all the other websites for a while, I could only find a handful of recent pictures of these cars. And one even popped up for sale randomly in New Jersey a couple years ago, but no one knows really what happened to that car. So it's still very likely that there are a couple of these incredibly rare Yenko Turbo Z Camaros out there just waiting to be found. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the short history of the incredibly rare and incredibly innovative 1981 Yenko Turbo Z Camaro. We hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, we would greatly appreciate it if you could drop a like and also share this video with other enthusiasts. Also, please make sure that you are subscribed to the Rare Cars YouTube channel and smash the notification bell for more documentary-style videos just like this on the world's most interesting cars. Until next time, enthusiasts.